Hello everyone and welcome to AndyDavo's race guide for humans in Blood Bowl 3. This video is going to cover several topics. I'm going to start by introducing the players to you. Then I'm going to talk about how to level those players up. After that, I'm going to give you some rosters so you can actually cohesively build starting teams that are good. I'm then going to go into both defensive and offensive setups. We'll include some strategy in terms of broadly how to play humans in there. And then I'm also going to finally give you some inducement advice in terms of what's good, what's bad on the inducement screen. I myself have played humans considerably in Blood Bowl 2. I was, or would have been, 4th highest ELO ranked human coach. I just needed to play 7 more games to actually get the official ranking. And I've played around 6,000 games of Blood Bowl overall. So hopefully that gives me a good knowledge of an understanding of what to do with humans. For me, humans are one of my favourite races, actually, because they've got the ability to both mix it up in a fight, they've got good strength access, and they've also got higher than average speed and agility access. Therefore, they can also play a slightly elf-like game. A lot of coaches will say, well, they're not actually good at anything. I would actually counter that and say, well, they're also not bad at anything either. So humans are actually a good team to start as a new coach because they will force you to play good Blood Bowl. And if you can play good Blood Bowl with humans, you can then apply those different strategies and concepts to the teams that are actually really good at either fighting or playing Elf Ball. And you'll find that you'll get a really good result out of either of those types of team once you try and move from humans to a specialist team. Let's dive in and look at the actual team itself. Right, the human team is now made up of 6 different positionals rather than 5 from Blood Bowl 2. We're going to cover off from top to bottom. So we're going to start with the Ogre. And the Ogre actually hasn't changed at all since Blood Bowl 2. So if you're familiar with this, this won't come as much as a surprise to you. But it's movement 5, strength 5, armor 10 plus. The key skills it's got here, we've got Bonehead as its nega trait because it's a big guy. Loner 4 plus, which is standard. Got Mighty Blow. And skill access wise, we're only on primary skills on strength, but we do have both general and agility as their secondary trees. In terms of how to use this guy, I would strongly advise against trying to build him as some sort of blitzer. He is there on a human team as a pivot or a roadblock, and therefore you should build accordingly. And so for me, the most important skill you can give this guy is guard at 6-star player points. And then after that, we want either stand firm and or juggernaut as the next 2 skills. And then there's a very interesting skill, I think, which I've talked about a little bit in previous guides, which is defensive. If you can put this guy on the line of scrimmage with defensive, it'll actually support the players around him and make those players slightly more difficult to knock over. So don't underrate defensive as a skill, although first early skills probably are guard and block, and then it's a choice between defensive or stand firm after that. From a randoming point of view, I would avoid randoming on the Ogre. He shouldn't be picking up lots of star player points, nor should you want to get rando skills on him. And again, from a characteristics point of view, I'd completely avoid them. The only characteristic you'd really be interested in is strength. It costs a fortune now, and is quite challenging to get anyway. Next, we're going to dive into the Blitzers. The Blitzers have had a slight costing change since Blood Bowl 2, now coming in at 85k. However, these are the actual stars of the team. I think they're brilliant, and you get 4 of them. And wherever possible, you should always play with 4 Blitzers. You should also try and get these into your starting roster, which I'll discuss in the next section. As a Blitzer, they start with a block skill, which is brilliant, one of the best skills in the game. Now, looking down the stat line, you'll see that they're actually faster than average, movement 7, which is brilliant. Average lead strength, average agility, and average armor value. So we're going to cover characteristics first as a level up. I think it's entirely reasonable that you would go for a characteristic on 1, 2, or even 3 of these players, because movement 8 is brilliant. It adds into the agility side of the game, and they are slightly better now at agility rather than strength. There are so many strength teams that are just better than them. You will need to lean into the speed side of the game more with humans now. So movement's fine. If you happen to look out and need to get a strength or an agility increase, though, that's where these players absolutely shine. Strength 4 blitzers or an agility 4 blitzer to go wherever. Absolutely amazing. And I'd pick either of those in a heartbeat on multiple players as well if I was offered them. For both passing and AV, I would avoid them. So just focus on the top 3 stats if you are offered a stat. Now on to level ups. So first of all, randoming. No, avoid them. There's far too many good skills to actually pick. The only time you'd random is if you're fishing for the very perfect player and you've got loads of time to just random the first skill or 2 and just get lucky. because randoming does mean that the cost of the skill is cheap, but the problem with randoming is unless you can afford to get the exact level you want, just avoid it. Roles for these blitzers. First of all, we need an enforcer type blitzer, and that is someone who already starts with block. You want tackle, which is here in the general tree. We also probably want frenzy to make sure that we knock over what we're hitting, and we need to back that up with the mighty blow skill here in the strength tree. Once you've got a killer, you'll have a lot of fun with it, and it'll also mean that player attrition should calm down a little bit on your side because you're able to remove their key players as well. If you want to lean into that even further, then Juggernaut's a great skill, but don't also go too much further than taking guard at some point on that player's development journey, because there are only 5 players on a human team that can get access to guard naturally, and it doesn't cost them a fortune. So guard is also a great skill to try and include. After that, you want the support players, and for me, I would build the other 3 in a very similar way, which is we've got block as our start point. Then we're looking to take guard as an immediately second skill. The reason you want to take guard straight away is because the whole team is broadly strength 3, with the exception of the catchers and possibly a halfling. So you're not out-strengthening anyone. And if you want to try and win any form of fighting war, you're going to need help with the guard skill to allow you to throw blocks. So guard is absolutely critical. It's why I've recommended it as first skill on the Ogre as well. And when we get to the Lineman, it'll make sense while we're talking about that on Lineman as well. So guard is your staple first skill. After that, I think Mighty Blow is a really strong second skill. And I would probably take off those 3, 2 more Mighty Blows to just add a little bit of firepower and punch to the team. Stand Firm is also very strong. And now Break Tackle has changed and allows you to be able to move these players around a little bit more. Do consider Break Tackle on anything with Edge 3, and especially something that's so fast. Break Tackle on a human blitzer to make it dodge on a 2+ is great. In the secondary trees, in here, I think 1 or possibly 2 blitzers having defensive make a lot of sense. And I've seen people take dodge, and if you go block, we've already got block, you take dodge. We stick that with Stand Firm. We've now got a block, dodge, Stand Firm player, who I hope we'd also stick guard on. And those sorts of players can really give you the ability to pivot around your opponent and cause a lot of problems on defense. So that's your human blitzers. Right, moving on to catchers. So the catchers on a human team are there to add a lot of speed. And previously, we might have considered building them into some sort of fouler. That's actually going to be covered off by something else. And I think the catcher's primary focus is one of 2 different things. You either want to be able to score with them really easily, or there's some sort of harassment piece because of their high movement. So just covering off the scorer type catcher first. We've already got dodge and catch. Let's lean into that. Let's take sprint and sure feet. Let's take sidestep. And that lets you move that player around really easily. And I think we're also going to need block as a defensive skill. If we got a statistic, I would absolutely take movement. I would also absolutely take agility. I don't think strength massively helps on a catcher from a scoring point of view, although I wouldn't turn it down just to stop the player getting 2 diced so easily. But really, we're fishing for movement, and we'd also quite like an agility increase. Passing's terrible, and armor value I would also avoid. The other type of player that you can build here, because of the high movement, is some sort of harassment or control player. And at that point, my first skill I take is block. And then we jump into the agility tree, we take sidestep, and we take diving tackle, because then now we've got a block, dodge, sidestep player with diving tackle, which is a real problem to get rid of. And we can also then jump back into here and think about things like tackle. That's the sort of player you can stick either directly onto a cage to slow them down. Not a good idea to do it on turn 2 or turn 3, but maybe on turn 5 or turn 6, once you're trying to break the drive and cause a turnover. This is a brilliant time to deploy this player. And you can also build this player into some form of ball sacker, which you can go wrestle, you can go tackle, and we can go dauntless here. That then equalizes the strength of the player. So wrestle, tackle, daunts. If you really want to lean into it, you could take strip ball as well. That is a really strong player. And humans are allowed 4 catchers. I think I would take all 4. And I would take 1 strip type player, as I've just discussed. I'd take 1 player with sidestep, sure feet, and sprint as a quick score. And then I'd build 2 really annoying catchers with the ability to take diving tackle, sidestep, block. And I would field 3 of them on defense in almost all circumstances because it adds so much speed to your team. I think they're great. I haven't talked about adding guard onto any of the catchers. You could, but I don't think that really synergizes with their actual role overall, and therefore I don't think there's really anything in this skill tree that you need to take, and it's also very expensive. So we can spend that extra team value on taking double skills on other positions within the human team. Now we're going to talk about the thrower. The thrower has actually had an upgrade since Blood Bowl 2. It now passes on a 2+ rather than a 3+. So you've got the ability to semi-reliably pick the ball up, and it also has the ability to dump off. Therefore, I think there's a standard way of building a thrower, but there is also a fun way of building a thrower. It's a bit of a shame that a cost increase. So running 2 is probably unwise, but I definitely would run 1 on all rosters, and I think you need to put 1 in your starting roster where possible. First of all, cover off the standard skills. So block is an absolute staple on this player. It relies on defense. You'll be fielding him on defense, so make sure you've taken block. And then we need to jump into the passing tree, and I think skills like on the ball, accurate, for giving yourself a bit more extra range, and leader make an awful lot of sense. If you want to make him into a ball carrier rather than a thrower, then let's jump into the agility tree and give ourselves dodge. Now you've got extra survivability, and if you're going to do dodge, then if you really want to lean into that, then you could go break tackle, although this is starting to get very expensive. I'm just pointing out the synergy with dodge and break tackle here. I think you would cap yourself at 1 double skill, and I would actually take dodge here. If you want to build yourself an out-and-out thrower, then pass, accurate, make a lot of sense. You could do dump off because that would be quite fun, although the catchers themselves, you'd need to skill a catcher into as a receiver. So go back to the catchers and make sure you've got yourself someone who's got diving catch. And then there's this other type of thrower, which we haven't seen in Blood Bowl 3 yet because it's only been around for a week. But the ability to do a running pass or a fumblerooski, these would aid your ability to be able to move the ball around and get your ball up to the catcher for the 1-turn touchdown, or the halfling if that's what you want to try and do. And I also think that running pass and fumblerooski would really allow you to move the ball around quite quickly. The downside to this is that inherently you're playing with an Edge 3 player, so this is not Elves. So I think these types of things are best left to High Elves who are currently not in the game, or possibly Elven Union if you really want to go down the passing route. So to sum up, I think you want to be taking leader, block, and probably accurate and on the ball as primary skills. And then if you want to take a secondary skill to add a bit more defense, then take dodge. Now we're going to talk about something that's brand new to Blood Bowl, which is the Halfling Hopeful. So the Halfling Hopeful's really cheap. We're allowed to have up to 3 of them. And actually on a slightly more developed roster, you'll certainly be taking 2. You'll notice that the primary skill tree they've got is agility. So the whole focus of this player is you'll field 1 on defense, or possibly offense as well. And you'll be taking Sneaky Git, and then you'll be taking Dirty Player. I've covered it in other guides. Sneaky Git, Dirty Player is now the meta for removing things, and absolutely you want to be taking one of these players so that you can destroy people. This role can actually also be filled by a Lineman, because the Linemen have general skill access, and then agility is secondary, so you're going to take a double and a single. Doesn't matter which way around you do it. So you could take a Halfling Hopeful. I don't think in Blood Bowl 3, in terms of a matchmaker, I don't think you'll see many of these get standard play for being thrown or anything like that. And I also think that really what these things are for is just to add an extra player on your bench, so you don't go into a game short-handed. I don't think that the Halfling Hopefuls have much value other than Sneaky Git, and I wouldn't take one unless I was going to plan on putting Sneaky Git on him. So everything else, I wouldn't random skills, I wouldn't take stats, I wouldn't take doubles other than Dirty Player, and for me this is broadly a gimmicky type player who I would broadly avoid. Now we're on to the Linemen. They're called Linemen. Really though, they should be called meat sacks or shields. They don't have any other role other than to get in the way and protect your blitzers and your catchers and your thrower. With that in mind, we need to be taking block where possible. I also think because you'll be leaning into the agility side playstyle more than you'll be leaning into the fighting style, I think having a couple of these with wrestle, certainly for line of scrimmage duties, if you can get someone with kick, that'll be great. It depends a lot on your setup, whether you're going to be running 3 or 4 catches, as to whether or not you can afford to put one of these not on the line of scrimmage. If you can't, do not take kick on one of these, and just don't run it at all. If you are going to be playing with only a couple of catches, then kick makes a lot of sense. From a double skill, I think there's only one double skill that makes a lot of sense, and that's guard. And I would absolutely try and save up. Once you've got block on a couple of these players, or wrestle, save up, put guard on the others, because this skill is so good, and now you can actually get it as a chosen skill. I would absolutely take guard. You do need to take someone with a sneaky git dirty player combination, so whether that's your Halfling Hopeful, or whether it's going to be your Lineman, just make sure you come in here and you pick up both. If it's going to be your Lineman, then you start with dirty player and you save for sneaky git, and if it's your Halfling Hopeful, you start with sneaky git and you save for dirty player. From a characteristics point of view, I don't see any characteristics on a human Lineman that would interest me. I don't see moving up from movement 6 to movement 7 important enough, and their primary role is to get in the way and take hits, so don't go and spend star player points on a thing that doesn't impact that in any way. You're unlikely to get strength or agility to turn them into something exciting, so I would just avoid statistics on this player, and you want 1 dirty player sneaky git, 2 or 3 skilled for line of scrimmage duty with block or wrestle, and then if players do start to level, make sure you take guard overall. There isn't anything else to do with this player, and if you want to random some levels, by all means, they only cost 10k, but just do stay inside this tree here and treat them as sort of bonus skills rather than something to build around. Right, let's go and look at some rosters. Right, as always, I've got 3 rosters for you, all built around something slightly different. Let's dive in and look at roster number 1. Roster number 1 is built around what I think is probably the most balanced roster. We've got the Ogre, 4 Blitzers, 1 catcher, 1 thrower, and then Lineman down to 11. We've given ourselves 3 team rerolls, and then we've also got a modicum of extra money coming in. So we've got 3 dedicated fans. This roster doesn't really need an awful lot else once we get going. So we'll pick up an apothecary straight away. And then I think I'd move straight into hiring either a second catcher or another lineman, depending on which way you want to play. Ultimately, you will be going to 13, but if you're playing in a matchmaking environment, you probably want to be looking at keeping yourself at around 12 players until you're hitting around the 1400 team value mark. Now let's look at roster number 2. Roster number 2 is a different roster. I've given you 4 rerolls. We've dropped the big guy, so there's no inherent unreliability. I'm keeping the 4 blitzers because I do think that they are super important to the team. And because we're dropping rid of the big guy, we're going to move away from a strength style of game, and we're going to move more into the agility style. So I've given us 3 catchers here. I have also given us 12 players because we are likely to lose players because we'll be stepping back and we won't be fighting as much. Unfortunately, that did mean that 12th player was a Halfling Hopeful. If you want to get rid of it, you could actually get rid of the Halfling Hopeful and then upgrade a Lineman into a 4th catcher to give you some absolutely bonkers agility options. It does only have 1 dedicated fan, unfortunately, so your money generation will be fairly slow, and we haven't still gotten our apothecary into the team. So bear in mind, this one is much more agility style, but doesn't really generate a lot of money. Your money generation needs to come from scoring touchdowns, and hopefully from that point of view, you're able to outposition and steal the ball off people and go and score. On our 3rd roster is something different again. This is for maximum money generation, and I've given us 5 dedicated fans this time so that you can go and pick up and replace any losses. This is probably good if you're going to play in a league format and you're expecting to get beaten up and pulverized in your first few games. You will generate extra revenue. It's not, unfortunately, enough to drop all the dedicated fans and hire an apothecary. The roster has changed just enough to make it so that's not possible anymore, unfortunately. Got an average number of rerolls, and we've got our 5, as I think, core positionals on the team. So 4 blitzers and Ogre. Ideally, the thrower picks the ball up, and at some point during the drive, he throws it at a blitzer's face. The blitzer catches it, and the blitzer scores. So then we end up leveling our blitzers straight away because they're the engine room of the team. We've only got linemen as our spare players, so you're going to have to go for dirty player as a first skill on one of these guys, and then we'll have to lean into sneaky get fate slightly further down the line. But overall, I think this roster will work, and you probably see this sort of roster in Matchmaker because everyone's armor 9+, apart from the Ogre, which is 10+. So I think you're picking from probably roster 1 and 3 in matchmaking. Me personally, I lean slightly more into option roster number 1. Right, let's go and look at some setups. Right, let's talk about offensive and defensive strategies, and also I'm going to talk about general tactics overall as well. So first of all, we're going to start with an offensive lineup. As usual, you'll probably recognize this from a lot of the other videos. It does have a slight variance, however, which is you'll notice that these guys are not flat like they normally are. They're actually a chevron and an inward chevron as well. The idea here is that the two catches are like this, and therefore those players can react and help you no matter what. You can't have them based by some Chaos Warriors that roll up here and just touch everything. The thrower stands as the furthest back point, and we've just got blitzers on the line here straight away. Now, in terms of offensive drive, humans themselves, and we'll talk general strategy now, humans need to decide, need to play the opposite type of game than the opponent that they're facing into. So, for example, you're playing against a Chaos team. They're the strength team in this matchup. You've got to play as the agility team. And yes, you can have some fighting, and yes, you can probably do all right, but you need to not try and outbash them, because you will lose. If you're playing against Pro Elves, right, you are the strength team in that matchup, because the Elf team is the Elves, and you need to therefore play as the strength team, and you need to play combat, and you need to put pressure on them. So, understanding what matchup you're in is critical to what strategy you're deploying. In terms of very quickly playing against Elves, that's fine. You need to take your blitzers that hopefully have got guard. You need to press them. You need to attack them. And it should be fairly simple. Just punch them in the face and play as the strength team. Fairly two-dimensional play strategy. What you do need to make sure is, though, is the ball is safe at all times. Keep it inside an X-shaped cage and make sure you've got some guard near your ball carrier. And ideally, one or two of the blitzers should be near the ball carrier, while the others with the Ogre are going to go and press into your opponent and make some space with some supporting linemen. It gets much more complicated when you play against the strength teams. And I've already given a slight hint in terms of how to do it already with this setup, which is that you need to keep players free. Because you're agility 3, you cannot possibly easily move around players. The worst thing that can possibly happen to a human team is that he just gets completely engaged by a higher strength team with more guard, with more armor value, and they just touch all of your players and you've got nothing that you can move. You're then forced into a 3+ dodge, it fails, your entire position will collapse. Many of you have probably had that situation happen to you. So what you need to do is two things. Number one, you need to spread out. So it would actually start from the line of scrimmage. If this was a mid-team value chaos game, that I might even consider, I'll throw my blocks, and then these two blitzers, number 4 and 5, are going to walk away. And so you're only going to leave 3 or 4 players, 5 players tops, that your opponent can then walk up to and touch. Because you've got 3 players, you can then go and target your blitz into one of those players that's touching one of your standing players. You then run that player away, and you're playing sort of hit and move. The other most important key thing is that this triangle here that we've got on the field, the thrower does not ever, ever, ever do that and go and stand next to a catcher. Because from a defensive point of view, it's really obvious the ball can only move 6 squares from the square it's in, and the catcher can only move 8 squares from where it's in. Their radius of where they can get to is overlapping. It's terrible. Make it worse. Put all 3 of your players that easily receive the ball together. They must spread out, and you must keep them as far apart as possible. So the thrower is okay to stand back, and the catchers, ideally you have one on each wing, so that this catcher can run all the way over to anywhere up here on the pitch, and this guy can run all the way over there, and the defensive coach has to cover all of those possibilities. And all you're going to do, find the weakest of the possibilities you're offered and punch through it with, hopefully, you've got something like this. You've got player here, and we've got a couple of blitzers where we've actually spread the team out a little bit, and we end up with something like this. Multi-layers, multi-free players, and that you can then respond to whatever they're doing. That's a defensive nightmare from the opposition and gives you strength. A much more detailed guide on this is on Fumble. So if you Google fumble.com and go and find humans, whoever wrote the human guide on Fumble deserves a massive piece of credit, because they talk about it over the course of about 4 sides of A4, and it's brilliant. So go and check that out. Now we've talked about safe as an offensive style, I'm going to talk about some defensive styles for you, and I've got a better boat. So humans, if you're playing against the strength team, you're going to want to try and dictate and control the center. So I've put all 4 blitzers in a little pile here. It's a nice L shape, so it's nice and compact and nice and strong. I've kept our squidgier players at the back and a lineman here. Now, you are going to need to separate this out, and you might think, well, I've just told you to spread out, and the first thing I've gone and done on defense is clumped together. That's fine. They're going to put a load of players onto your line of scrimmage. They've also got to go and take someone off to go and go and fetch the ball. They will not on turn 1 want to engage your 8 players with their 4 or 5. However, you can't stay like this, and you are going to need to sort of spread out a little bit. The idea of this is that that's the player they're going to blitz because it's easy, and the blitzers are much more complicated to get at, or you'll get to trade. So that's fine. That's why that number 9 is there. It is a better boat. So yeah. Next, we've got chevrons. This is probably more, again, an elf team or something, a team that you want to go and attack. I've put the blitzers on the front. This is assuming they've got frenzy. If they don't have frenzy, then you can absolutely step the wings forward a little bit. You want to be slightly hesitant about putting the everyone forward in the flatline defense because these guys are only strength 2. And if your opponent's got a tackle mighty blow player, they will target them. So it's either this or flatline if you think the catches won't get punched in the face. And of course, it's only this if your opponent has doesn't have a frenzy player. We've got the Ogre and 2 line nose on the line. And in fact, sorry, the Ogre should be in the middle. And that's a little like human man formation, which I quite like. It's a chevron or a combination of chevrons. And then finally, I've got an attack formation, which is if you want to go and put oodles of pressure on your opponent, first of all, we should offset the line of scrimmage. Something that I like to consider I popularized way back when, at the beginning of Blood Bowl 2. Not claiming I invented it, claiming maybe I popularized it. I'm sure I've seen it on Fumble 10, 15 years ago. But what the offset line of scrimmage does is it gives you the ability to be able to attack down one side because you're creating a lot of space. Because wherever you put your line of scrimmage, your opponent will certainly put 4 or 5 players across the top there. So that means that from this square all the way across, you'll have a bit more space to attack into. What I've done is I put catcher on one side, and I've got catcher on the other. It's entirely reasonable to swap the catcher and the thrower around because you're not going to attack down there. If you do that, however, your opponent is now noticing you've put your fast players all on one side because that's blitzer, 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 and 2 catches. You're absolutely trying to swing down our right-hand side, and so they will load the right-hand side. If you keep it a little bit more generic and keep catches on both flanks, then they've got to defend the left flank and the right flank, and it's not really costing you too much other than sticking a catcher here. Those catchers should be the ball hawks that I talked about in the level up guide, and you might actually consider taking the thrower off at this point and having 3 catchers. So you've got your ball hawk in the middle, and then 2 players that are really obnoxious with the blodge and the sidestep and the diving tackle to dive forward on either flank to cause problems. If you do get a player with kick, that's the place that it would go. It would be on number 9. And you notice that you've only just about got enough players to put a kick player on the line because we're only fielding 3 linemen here, 1, 2, 3. And if you're going to field your thrower, then you haven't got a lineman at all. So you need to consider how you're leveling your players up because how you level them up dictates where you're going to have to put them on the field as well. In all of these, I've also left the blitzers massively exposed to getting punched in the head. This is more a low or medium team B setup. Once you get to high team value, you need to start hiding players because the value loss of losing a blitzer on turn 1 to being punched in the face is terrible. This setup also only works against non-frenzy teams. So if it's against frenzy, just take everything and squidge it in by 1. And then you've got broadly the same setup. You can also potentially do this against frenzy as well, which gives you the chevron to stop your player getting surfed. So there's some options. And make sure that you're considering whenever you're doing a setup, what time of team am I playing into? Therefore, what should my strategy be? And your positioning and setup is all based around that question rather than making pretty patterns on the field. Right, let's dive into the last section, which is inducements. Welcome to the final section of the guide video. This is going to be inducements. Before I dive into the inducement section, many of you have been having questions, which very kindly been putting in the comment section. But did you know you could also come and say hello live? I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/AndyDavo, and I'm live pretty much every Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evenings from 7 PM UK time. And I also stream on a Saturday and Sunday evening from around about 5 PM UK time. Right, inducements. As usual, I'll break it into the 3 sections. We're going to cover off mercenaries first because it's nice and quick and nice and easy. As with most of these teams, there are only 2 reasons you'd come into this section, I think, and that would be to hire an ogre and give it the guard skill, or you'd come in here and you'd be hiring a lineman, which is this player here, and be giving it the dirty player skill. That you'd be trading off against picking up a star player, and so nicely we can jump into the star player section. Humans have access to 7 star players, of which we can actually immediately rule out 1, which is Barak Fairblast. Although he's only 80k, he's terrible, and I wouldn't be picking him up unless we had absolutely nothing else to spend our money on. In here, we've also got then a selection of quite good star players, and sitting in at the sort of the cheap end, we've got Helmut Wolf. He sits at 140k, and he's vying for whether or not you take him or a wizard. I think a lot of the time the wizard is just better value. Once the specific skills around star players come in, Helmut Wolf gets a lot more value because he can. His once per game is pretty strong. He's also got pro, which helps counteract the chainsaw kickback mechanic. So he's pretty good once you've got the once per game in. After that, there are 3 players that sit very similarly in terms of cost. We've got Griff Overwald, Grombrindal the White Dwarf, and Carla von Kill. Sorry, 4. It's Carla von Kill, and there is also Mighty Zug. Now, of those, there is only one player you should aim to try and hire. You should always hire him. He's awesome. He is that good that he's probably the best star player you can take for humans. It's Griff Overwald. He is movement 7. But he's not movement 7 because, like in a Bull Centaur in Blood Bowl 2, he's got sprint. He's also got sure feet. So he's effectively movement 10. He's strength 4. He's also dodging on a 2+. But he's got block and he's got dodge. He is amazing. He's also got fend. So chain pushing him and blocking him over the tall ace is really difficult. He's Armor 9+, and he can pass kind of badly at a pinch. Once we get his once per game, he becomes even stronger. So Griff Overwald is the star of star players for humans, and if I was only picking one of the 2 star players, him or Morg, I think you've got to consider that if you're trying to win a game, one game outright, Griff Overwald is your player. He is absolutely amazing. So please take that away from this section, which is if you can take a star player, if you can take Griff, you take Griff. After that, there are 3 star players. Gromindal at 210k, he's great fun at tournaments. Carla von Kill, she's okay. Movement 6, strength 4, block and dodge, she's okay. And then we've got the Mighty Zug, who's movement 4, strength 5, block and mighty blow. He's a bit like a slow lineman or a second ogre. Some players will take Mighty Zug in place of an ogre because actually you don't use the guard skill that much. Dropping Bonehead is better, and so you've got strength 5, block, mighty blow. He's okay, he's not Griff. Jumping back to the star player that actually might see some play once the game's been fully implemented correctly, which is Grombrindal. Grombrindal's once per game. He's not really once per game, he's once per turn. He hands an extra skill to one of the players around him. One of those skills is Mighty Blow, and another of those skills is Break Tackle. So that really helps uplift the human blitzers to being a little bit more damage output or a little bit more mobile. And so Grombrindal will see play once he's been correctly coded. Final star player is the one that I hate talking about. I hate giving him publicity, but he is that good. He's strength 6, he's Mighty Blow +2, he's Morgenthorg, and he needs changing out of the game. Otherwise, we're going to have balance problems moving forwards. He is amazing, and I think on a ladder format where you're not trying to win one particular game, you're just trying to make sure that you can outpunch your opponent. Morg is still that good, and he probably still pips Griff to the post in terms of picking him. So it's Morg and Griff, whereas in a lot of other games it's just Morg, everybody else. Griff is that good, he gets close to Morg in a lot of things. Inducements wise, really in here I'm not really looking to take anything particularly other than the star players. I think they add so much to your team that star players would be where I'd start with your inducements. If you are, then the wizard and the bribe, if you've correctly skilled with the bribes for the dirty player sneaky git combo, is fine. And then a wizard, once the fireball is correctly coded, will also be worth taking. Anytime I would also then take other stuff in here. The Bloodwiser kegs if you're taking into a really strong strength team, because you will take attrition and you will want your blitzers and your catchers back on the field, and potentially a biased referee if you're going to get fouled. So those ones are sort of edge and inducements based on the matchup, and then you take the assistant coaches and cheerleaders once you've got nothing else to spend them on. I personally like taking the cheerleaders to try and get the prayers to Nuffle because you're already playing with 3 rerolls. However, if you're playing into someone with only 2 rerolls, then maybe the assistant coach, to deny them getting the reroll, is quite strong. So that closes out the guide video. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you leave a comment in the section below and subscribe, because only about half of the people watching these videos are subscribed at the moment. So please come and join in and join the Twitch community and the YouTube community for a slightly longer time. I've been AndyDavo. It's been great doing these guide videos. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.